If you want to participate, contact me at ordinarywomenpodcast@gmail.com. I'm sure you have great projects to brag about. You can also follow me and message me on Instagram at ordinarywomenpodcast, on Twitter at ordinarywomenpc, or on Facebook on the page Ordinary Women.
Hi everyone, welcome to a new episode of Ordinary Women. I'm welcoming Margaux today. Hi Margaux, how are you?
Hi, Lucy. I'm great, thanks. How are you? And thank you so much for having me.
I'm good too. Thank you so much for joining me today. Real pleasure to have you. Can you start by giving us a quick introduction of yourself, please?
Of course. So my name is Margaux. I'm 26. I'm French, and I've been living in Montreal for 2 years and a half now. And I've started the third year of my PhD a few weeks ago. So my thesis is about social movements, but I'm also working on gender and biodiversity. And I have a project that is more on pedagogy and intersectionality, where I'm trying to examine the combined dynamics of like sexism and social class and racism. And I've been living abroad for about 5 years now. I spent about a year in Hong Kong and a few months in India for my master, then a few months in Spain in Madrid before moving here to Montreal in Canada.
Wow, that is so cool. I have tons of questions already, but yeah. But is there, well, I guess all of these things are already unusual, but is there another unusual thing about you?
So I thought about that. I don't know if it's unusual, but I was part of the collective Collège Féministe in Montreal for a few months when I arrived in Montreal before starting my PhD. I don't know if you know the collective, but the goal of these actions, it's actually plural because on one hand, it's about sticking slogans on the walls of public buildings to pay tribute to women murdered, notably by their spouse or ex-spouse. But on the other hand, it's also about being a group of women at night in the streets and, taking back the public space. And I thought this experience was really powerful. And I also think that's one of the things why I felt so good in Montreal because I did that for a few months and that's part of why I'm comfortable here. And I remember I wanted to do that in Paris, but I was kind of scared, but not that much about, like the police thing, but more because I was scared about what my friends would think. So when I moved, I thought it was a good time to start. And there is a small anecdote. It's not funny, but we got arrested one night. And at that time, I did not have a Canadian visa. I was still waiting for my student permit. And over the years, I've realized how privileged I am as, white, upper class, educated woman. It might seem anecdotal, this anecdote, but in my feminist journey, this night it was one of the moments where I truly realized that we were not all equal in front of the police because all the other women with me that night were Canadian citizens and I was the only foreigner and we were in a park. And to be honest, I was scared that it would have repercussions on my student permit and my PhD, but at the same time, I felt I don't know, really powerful because we were together and we were doing something that truly felt right because we were paying tribute to murdered women. So I was mad because, again, we were doing something that felt right, but we had to pay a huge fine. So the collective paid, but like, of course, we would have preferred to save this money for other actions or events. And also, it happened sometimes that we were putting slogans on the walls and people like just a few minutes after were removing them. And it's just so frustrating because I don't understand why you would do that. Remove the name of a woman that has been murdered by her ex-spouse or something. But I remember, for the anecdote, telling my sister on the phone after my first time that I went with the collective at night, to do that. And I was on the phone telling her, and I told her, don't tell mom, because my mom is really by the rules. And my sister, she told me like, oh, but she's sitting next to me and she heard everything. Sorry. But later that day, I actually received a text from my mom saying, I've taught you to respect rules when they're fair, but otherwise the right thing to do is to disobey. And I don't know, she probably doesn't remember it, but I've kept this word really close to my heart since then. And I even told her that I got arrested, and she was like, oh, that's badass.
Oh my God, that is so cool. Thank you
Oh, yeah.
so much for sharing. It's so interesting because I actually have a very similar story that I got arrested the very first time I went
Really?
to do some collage, and it scared me, so I stopped because of that. Also because like same visa problems, you're like and like coming back to also what you were saying about how privileged we are in front of the police. Basically, at that point, we were a group of only white women. We were like maybe like 8. Also, there was this very
Yeah.
funny moment where one police officer had like a glove to hold my brush with the like wallpaper glue, as if it was like something really, like a weapon or something. Because I didn't know what we were doing basically, but that was kind of funny. It's like it is
Yeah.
wallpaper glue, babe. Like chill. But yeah, anyway, they let us go, so it was great. For us, obviously, like no fine, nothing. But it was really scary, obviously. And now, like, whenever I go back to that place, I'm like, oh my God, like I almost got harassed here. But a few weeks later, another group also went to do some collage, and I think it was 3 black women, and they got arrested for they stayed 24 hours, I think, in yeah, at the end. Like that's
Oh,
again,
no.
like how freaking unequal the system is. Just yeah, but I really like what your mom said. That's really, really cool.
I know,
Yeah.
and it was unexpected because, yeah, as I said, like she's really by the rule, and she's not always supportive of my ideas, or like she thinks I'm maybe too radical or something. So I mean, it was really important for me the fact that that she supported me. But sadly, with the PhD, I'm really busy, so I have no time to do some collage, but I would love to do it again. Honestly, it's a great experience, and just being, as I said, like between women or gender minorities at night and taking back the public space, for me, it's really, really important.
Yeah, 100%. These groups are so important. That's so cool. I hope that one day you rejoin. Cool. Thanks so much for sharing. Obviously, in this podcast, we talk a lot about what it's like to be a woman. So I'd like to start by asking, was there a moment or an event in your life when you realized that you are a woman?
Well, so I think it's been now but like 7 years that I label myself as a feminist. But your question, actually makes me think about my childhood and teenagehood, and I think I've conscientized a lot of things later. But looking back, there were a lot of things, but I think back then I didn't realize. So it's a bit personal, but like I know that the intimate is political, so let's go. I'm gonna share a few things.
Yes.
But for instance, I think my first serious relationship lasted for about 4 years, and I was in high school. And I remember, and you're gonna laugh because honestly, it's ridiculous, but I remember that I was often waking up a bit earlier to put makeup on before going back to bed, just because, I didn't want my boyfriend at that time to see me without makeup. And I was, of course, shaving almost daily. I was on the pill. I was buying cute lingerie. But the most interesting thing when I think about that is that my boyfriend never asked me for that. And it's not always the case, of course. But in that particular relationship, it was pretty obvious looking back that I had deeply integrated patriarchal dictates, and I was trying hard to conform to them, even though like It wasn't about him or about the relationship. Actually, it was about me and the thing that the society was telling me to do. And it took me years to realize that I was, conditioned by that system. Then when I lived in Lille for 2 years, there the street harassment was extremely important. Like I was approached or insult pretty much every day in the streets. Um, yeah, no, honestly, it was brutal. And also, I did a business school there, and like at parties, there were, looking back, terrible things done to women. Like rankings, points, for when like actually male students, they're at the shared tables where they were putting like, like they were ranking women, and they were also like counting,
What?
mostly like with points, like, oh, this woman, she slept with the X, and this one slept with A, and yeah, it was pretty much horrible, and it was
What?
shared, so all the school had access to that.
What?
Yeah, no, honestly.
What the
And
business?
then, yeah, I know, it's pretty scary, but like the thing is also that when you're in that system, you don't really have the choice, because then there's also the social pressure, and you want to belong, and you want to be part of, an association or whatever. There is all these mechanisms underlying that are putting a lot of pressure on female students. So yeah, but then again, I realized that years later, and then there was another collision of events related to my exchange in India, because even before going, when I was only applying for university there, my parents, they were super scared and reacted super strongly. My colleagues, that told me that I was crazy going there, alone as a woman. And I even remember a friend of my ex-boyfriend telling him that he would not allow his girlfriend to go to India alone. I was like, what does that mean?
Uh, yeah.
That he would not allow his girlfriend to go to India? Like, honestly, really?
Mhm.
Um, and of course, like none of these people that ever traveled to India lived there. So it was
Obviously.
really focused on the risk of being a Western white woman there, based on nothing but prejudices.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I was, I just wanted to have an experience, and I was looking at, national parks there and the cities to visit and blah, blah, blah. And I was looking for, tourist tips.
Yeah.
And they were only telling me about risk and
Mm.
risk of being assaulted and raped. And of course, it's not insignificant to go to India alone. But for instance, like, I mean, what was striking was the reduction of one of the most diverse and complex countries on the planet to
Mm.
one aspect, like the violence against women. But on the other hand, what was striking was the incapacity to understand that as a woman, I'm also facing risk in France or in Canada, Like, as I said, in
Exactly.
Lille, I was facing street harassment pretty much every day, but that was impossible to understand, from my family or friends or like people. Oh yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
um, but just I just want to, like, a bit, a little disclaimer, but like, I am it's really important for me to say that, but I'm talking from a very privileged position. As I said, I'm white, educated, middle class. These considerations are, of course, nothing compared to what other women in different countries can live, of course. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing. Wow. Yeah, I'm still not over the like rating file or whatever that is in Lille. Like, I don't even know what to say. It makes me so angry. But glad you had a great time in India. It's
Yeah, it
yeah.
did actually, and I had no problems.
Yeah, there you go. Huh. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And going back even more in your memory, did you grow up with any women role model or like feminine role model?
Um, well, that's a good question, because I think I've always looked up to women, even when I was a kid, and to people who are passionate and driven. But for instance, when I think about my childhood and about like the women around me and my family, like clearly I did not get my feminist side from my mom. But I think what I got from her was equally important, because in my mom's side of the family, it's only my mom, my grandma, and my aunt, who's also my grandmother, and we're really close. And for me, I think they have always represented this strong feminine trio, So, except for my dad, of course, but like without men, and they care for each other so much. They've gone through honestly really, really hard times, but they've always been, care for each other. They care for each other. And my mom, even though like she's not committed in feminist organizations or events or collectives or whatever. But she volunteered a lot when she was younger, to help, for instance, adults with disabilities. So she was head of holidays camp for adults with disabilities. She was part of associations. So she did a lot of things and still do. And my grandma, she's also like right now, and she's 77, 78, and she gives French classes to immigrants, especially Ukrainians. And she does a lot of things, like she volunteers to Les Restos du Cœur, to help people there. So yeah, I think what they've told me is really that it's important to care about your family and your friends, but also about people in general. And because they've gone through difficult times, but even during these times, like if you have a bit of mental space or a bit of physical capacity or financial capacities, then you have to give back to society. So I think that the strong message from this model that I got from my childhood.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That's so great. And yeah, I can definitely imagine how that shaped you in being the person that you are today. And what about today? Do you have other role models?
Yeah. First of all, I think I'm really inspired by my girlfriends, because they're strong and independent women and have strong values. Also because we're taking care of each other, we're raising each other, supporting each other. I'm lucky to have my female childhood friends who are still among my closest friends today, and this is really precious to me. And I know that they would agree, but I don't think our societies attach sufficient importance to friendship. So my female friendships are really precious to me, and I really admire them. And on a more abstract level, I think my models are activists, like women who dedicate their lives to social justice and ecology to create a better world. That might sound cheesy, but it's actually true. I read a book this summer, Camille Etienne's first essay. I don't know if you know her. She's a environmental activist, and she mentioned something that I found really relevant, that there are people who are fighting against deleterious projects and unfair laws, like she does. And there are also people who are inventing new way of being together as a society. For instance, by creating alternative way of doing things. And I think that's really inspiring, because it means that we can change things in a million ways. But also our way of reinventing relationships and friendships and community, it's already making a difference. So yeah, I think my models would be like all these people that are trying hard to do things in a different way, in a better way. And also last summer, because I know that you know her, so I'm gonna say that. Last summer, I was going through a really difficult time, and I read Gloria Steinem's autobiography, My Life on the Road. And I think she's one of my models for sure. Like, it's one of the most inspiring story that I've read, and it gave me strengths, and it's exactly about that. It's about fighting for what's right, resisting, but he really shows that, it's a collective adventure. It's full of solidarity, of beauty, of friendship, of love. So that's the thing that I'm trying to, remind me every day.
Yeah, that's super cool. I really like that blend of celebrities, people you read things of, and friends, because at the end of the day, they're the people we see the most, probably. That is so cool. And yeah, this book, probably one of my favorite books ever. I absolutely loved it.
Also, at that time of my life, it also reminded me that, even though, because I was going through a breakup basically, and it showed me that, life is not only about that, it's also about like friendship and what your passions and adventures and what you're doing, and yeah, that you can count on, other types of relationship, and they're as, as beautiful, and yeah,
Yeah,
it's really strong.
I definitely agree with all of this. Thank you so much. And do you think that the lack of representation of women in society had an impact on you growing up?
Oh yeah, for sure. um, I yeah. For instance, I think it took me longer than it should have to find my way because of
Mm,
that, and I suffer from imposter syndrome, as do the vast majority of women that I know. And most women that I know, they apologize a
mm,
lot. They're careful when they speak, especially if they don't know the public. They overthink a lot of things. So yeah, I think it impacted me, and especially in my world, so in academia, we see there are a lot of women professors right now, but it's hard, and it's important to talk about it, and we're trying to do that. But women are still discriminated for jobs in university. And honestly, I was talking about that with one of my professor. I'm really we're really close yesterday, and she was like, oh, it's hard to have kids if you want to finish your PhD and become tenured. And male PhD students or male professors, they often do not even realize that. And so she was telling me about the fact that it's hard to have your kids during the PhD because you arrive on the job market and they wonder why on earth it took you, 7 years to do your thesis. But actually, they don't realize that you had one to X kids during that journey. But if you have kids after your PhD during what we call the tenure track, you might never get tenured. So it means that you're not a professor, like full-time professor in the university. And if you have them after that, because it takes about 5 years, and if you have them after that, so after your PhD, after you get tenured, then you face additional risk because it means that you're a bit older. She was telling me that because her story that she waited to get tenured, but then she had geriatric pregnancy. So she was like, yeah, my kids were facing, additional health risks
mm,
basically. And yeah, so I mean, in terms of representation and models in my world, they're all women. But the fact is that it's often hidden the sacrifices that they had to do to access these positions, and their career are going slower because of, they have to do all the reproductive work and stuff like that. So yeah, and what I think about what I wanted to join academia in the first place is that, we're supposed to create new knowledge and do research. And so if women are not able to access the same fundings or the same positions, or to have the same, research budgets, I mean that the research that they're interested in is not going to be as well funded or whatever. And so in terms of the knowledge that we have or the books that are published, then they're biased. So I think it's really important to talk about that. And again, like, I have to mention the fact that it's a very privileged world, academia. So, I mean, sexism or the lack of representation of women is is even worse or stronger outside of this bubble, because sometimes it feels like a bubble.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was so interesting. I'd like to jump on the kind of second part of this podcast and talk about a project or life achievement or whatever you want to call it that you're proud of. And yeah, I want to talk about today. So what do you want to talk about today?
Okay, so my project is called Refemi. So it's a combination of references and feminist, kind of. The good thing is that the name works both in French and in English. So yeah, it's a collaborative platform on feminism, or more exactly on women and feminist studies, but in a very broad definition of the terms. Like, the idea of the platform is to offer a variety of references on a variety of subjects, which is very broad. There are several categories of references: books, so for example, essays, or theoretical books on sociology, philosophy, anthropology, history, economics. But we also have novels, autobiographies, comics, and there are also films, series, documentaries, podcasts, theater, social networks. So all of that are the different categories of reference, and the themes are very varied, from reflections on work to questions about women bodies, institutions such as the family, the couple, the state, prison, school, worker struggles in different countries. So, for instance, I don't know, India, Guatemala. So the aim of the platform is to represent artists and authors from a variety of countries, but also from a variety of angles. For instance, there are many feminist, I don't know what we can call, maybe school of souls, represented on the platform. So this is why in French I'm always using feminism plural, because there is materialist feminism, intersectional feminism, ecofeminism, Afrofeminism, anarchist feminism, to name a few. And the level of the resources on the platform is also very diverse. So there are very accessible references for beginners, or for people that are starting to question something. And there are also more specialized references. That can be academic books or whatever, which sometimes require prior knowledge of a subject, or it's just that it's very, very specific. So yeah, and the aim is for every subject on the platform to be addressed at every level with different angles. And it's a collaborative platform. So it was very, very important to me from the start that it should be something collective, because I'm really aware that I have a lot of bias due to my, social position. So it's going to be launched, and after, everyone will be able to create an account and to suggest new references. Although, of course, it will be moderated, but that's the idea. So you have this collaborative platform with all these references. And for instance, if you read a book or you listen to a podcast, and then you're like, oh, it's not on Refemi, and I think it's pretty relevant. So you can have your own account and then add, I don't know, your podcast is already on the database.
Oh,
I'm just saying.
thank you.
But let's say it's not. You go to podcast and you add ordinary women, and then you put name tags, and then there is a little templates for every categories of reference. And for instance, for podcasts, you're gonna put a little description of the podcast, a little description of the author, and then I don't know if there's a few episodes, maybe like the details of the episodes, or if there's too many, maybe not. And then there is the most important section, is going further. And in this section, I've put a lot of additional references and links. So for instance, if you have a book, then on the going further, You might have, I don't know, an interview of the authors, or a podcast that is on the same topic, or another book that is related. So I think this section is really maybe the added value of the platform, because then you can make links and you can go deeper if you like the topic. Yeah, the idea is also that, as I said, many angles are represented. So there are some, touchy topics, and I think they deserve to be, treated with different angles, but also sometimes different, I don't know, specialties, for instance. Like if you read something about reproductive work, but from a sociology point of view, then from I don't know, you read a novel about that, then a podcast, just to give you a more complete idea. So yeah, that's the that's the pitch.
This is so cool, and I'm really excited that we can talk about it today because I think it's such a brilliant idea. So talk us through how you got the idea and why you started.
So I think it was in November 2020, and I remember that very precisely because it was during the second lockdown in France, and I was actually applying for the PhD in Montreal. I was supposed to go there before starting the PhD, but there were like visa issues due to the COVID, and I had to pass the TAJMAJ for my application, which is like a standardized test, whatever. But once I was done with the TAJMAJ, the fact that I couldn't really like look for a job here in France because I was supposed to go to Montreal, and at that time I didn't have the answer for the PhD, so I was I was in a weird place because I was like, okay, I have time. All my friends are, it was a lockdown, so you couldn't have much social interactions and people were working. And so I started to put on the Discord page all the feminist books and podcasts that I have read and listened, just because I was kind of frustrated by the fact that I don't know if you do the same, but I'm part of a lot of Facebook groups about, feminism, and people are sharing a lot of resources, but it's just that it's not clear, it's not well structured, it's just like it's chaos. And so I was really frustrated, and it started with that frustration actually. So I put everything on the words, but then later on, a friend of mine gave me the idea of creating a proper database, and he showed me a software and was like, oh my god, that's interesting. And so I've started like that, like collecting books that I read, and putting like pieces of analysis and links, and it was not structured at first. And after a few weeks, I put a post on a feminist group on Facebook, and I was like, hi girls, I have this idea of creating a sort of a platform, and I would like for it to be collaborative because I think it's more interesting. And do you think it's a good idea? Like, would you like to participate? And then hundreds of people commented the post, but then it was again chaos because people were like, I read this book, I listened to this podcast, which was super nice because they were interested. But then I was like, okay, that's not the good way of doing that. So I was like, I'm gonna create the database, and once it's ready, I'm gonna put it out there, and then people will be able to add references. But they, in the comments on that post, and I'm talking about that because that's interesting because Laura, who was at that time a web designer, she answered and she was like, oh, I'm a web designer and I would be interested to create your website. And then we started talking and we were like, yeah, let's do this project together. And so at first we started with the WordPress website, like very basic. But then later on, she got accepted in sort of coding training. I don't know, it lasted for like 6 months or something. And so she learned how to code, and she was like, okay, the WordPress is not gonna work for the idea that you have because I wanted this collaborative platform. So she was like, do you mind if I pitch Refemi as a final project for my degree? and I will need all the people to work with me because it's supposed to be a group project. And I was like, yeah, go on. And so she did that, and four people joined the project at that time. They started coding the platform, and me on like that was the more technical part of Refemi, and me on my own I was creating the content of the database, always adding new references and to have a richer platform. And that took I don't know, like 2 years or
Oh,
something.
wow.
And then so she finished her training, she got a degree, she started working as a professional developer, and then the older persons actually out for a few months after that. They wanted to continue, so that was good. But then we realized, so at some point we had the first demo, and we thought that we were going to be able to launch the platform, and we launched the social media. So that was a big stress and a big step for me. But then we realized that actually there were too many technical issues, and because they were really like they were beginners when they started coding, which is really, really fine. But then they had made too many mistakes from my understanding, which made everything more complicated after. And so recently, like actually in May, a more senior developer joined the project and said that we had to start again
Oh
for the
no.
technical part, like for the code, because of course, like I have all the content, like I have developed more than 2,000 references, but for the code, like for the actual structure, we had to start all over again, and that was so hard
Yeah.
to hear because I was so depressed by that. But then apparently it's normal, it's part of the process. And so they've been working on that, the two of them, so Laura and the senior developer, Victor, for a few months now. And I think it's going to be ready like for first, like a beta version soon. But yeah, it was a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah, I can imagine. What kept you going? Because, like, I guess at that point, on the one hand, obviously already invested a lot of energy, other people as well. But it's like, I mean, I don't know also because I don't know anything about development, but I guess sometimes be like, oh my God, starting again, like all over. I don't know, like, how did you face that?
Well, I think I don't know anything about coding either. So for me, it was a bit frustrating because on one hand, I wanted Laura to be like co-founder or something, and she's always been like, I prefer to be backend developer or whatever. Like I'm not
Hmm.
familiar with the technical terms, but she did not want to be co-founder or project leader, because she was like, my job is technical. So on one hand I was like, okay. On the other hand, for me it's frustrating because I don't understand any of these things. So I trust them, like, and I trust her, and of course, and they've done tremendous work, honestly, and all of that is like on their free time, of course. Like it's not
Yeah.
I cannot pay anyone. um but so it was, honestly it was hard, but when I look at it, for me it's also part of the process, because we
Hmm.
wanted something, or I wanted something collective and collaborative, and this journey with different people giving inputs at some point when they were able to do it, when they had time to do it. And also the fact that we were all beginners, honestly. I didn't know what I was doing when I started. And so I'm just looking at it like, okay, it's part of a process. The way we manage the process is also interesting, because if it would have been a paid developer, like a paid senior developer without any interest on the project, like the content of the project, which is actually, you know, women and feminist studies and topics, I don't think I'll be satisfied.
Hmm.
Um, And what keeps me going actually, that also I think I've talked about it to a lot of people that were really enthusiastic, especially my friends, my female friends. They've always supported me and said that it was a good idea. But even like people that I don't know, and when I launched the social media, what was interesting is that we couldn't do much advertisement because the platform is not online. So you're like, you cannot say, hey, let's follow this account for a platform that is not online yet. But there was a little bit of traction, and I've started receiving messages of people that I don't know that were like, oh, that's super interesting, thank you. And because I've started sharing some thematic posts and some ideas and stuff like that, people were sharing, or people were sending me messages saying like, oh, I listened to this podcast because it was on Refemi's Instagram page and I loved it and it made me realize blah blah blah. And that kept me going. Like, it's keeping me going because it's honestly, yeah, a powerful feeling to, yeah, to think that maybe
Yeah,
you can have a really, really small impact on, people's journey. That's really, yeah.
that is so cool. Yeah, definitely. And like because we kind of know each other, I knew about that before
Yeah.
right now. And so I've also like mentioned that to people around me who are all like, this is so cool. And I literally cannot, I don't know if I told you, but yeah, a lot of people are
No,
really
but
excited. Okay, well, yeah.
really?
Yeah, and
Oh
every
my
time
God,
I
thank
put
you.
like repost your things on Instagram, like there's always
Thank
people
you.
reacting and being like, "Oh my God, that sounds super cool."
But on the other hand, I talked about that with Laura, but when she was looking for, more senior developers to help her with some technical issues, some people told her that, they didn't want to work on the project because of the topic. They were like, oh,
Really?
that's not for me. Not because they were against it, but because, yeah, they were like, yeah, I don't want to have, like, that's not me, that's not what I want to
Mm.
do, that's not for me. Like, it's cool that you're doing something like that, I'm happy for you, but I won't work on that. And I was kind of shocked when I heard that.
Yeah, because also in a way, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I always kind of struggle to find ways to express my activism, if I can say that. Like how to be an activist is really like, yeah.
Yeah.
I think Gina Martin wrote a book about that I still need to read. If it's not on Refemi, I'll add it when I can. Um, but yeah, anyway, like I'm always like, oh, and this sounds like, I don't know, like just a great thing to do where it's like you can get training and at the same time know that you're doing something good. Like, you know what I mean? It sounds like I don't want to say
Mm.
easy because I doubt that it is easy. I really much think it's not. But someone else had the idea, you know what I mean? Like you just have to join and do the thing that you know how to do. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really relevant because this summer when I was reading the book that I mentioned
Hmm.
from Camille Etienne, and she's an activist. Like, I mean, she's blocking total
Right.
General Assembly. She's on the street.
Oh my
She's
God,
doing
so cool.
lobbying, and I'm fascinated by these people. And I was like, oh my God, I want to be more involved in actual
Mm,
collective actions. Also because my thesis is on social movements, so I mean I'm reading
yeah.
about that all day, and so I want to be part of that. But then after that I was like, oh, but if I do additional things, like I won't be able to carry the project that I have going on, such as Refemi. And I think Refemi is a good example of, okay, I'm doing what I'm good at, which is, I'm not pretending that I have no legitimacy or capacity to write a feminist essay, for instance. But what I do know how to do is to collect this information. I understand pretty well the different, topics. And so what I can do is create something where you have all these resources that are structured and easy to access and blah, blah, blah. And so I was thinking about that because I was like, yeah, maybe that's more me, maybe my part of the job is to do something like that. Because then sometimes it's also a bit lonely. Like I've learned so much with this platform for the past 3 years because I've been reading a lot. I've been listening to a ton of podcasts or, documentaries. But at the same time, and also sometimes it's a break from my thesis, clearly, because it's a different but interconnected topic. But when I'm tired of working on my research, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do that. But at the same time, it can be lonely. And that's why I was kind of desperate to launch it, because after that I have other plans, because I would like to, maybe create small events or roundtables or a collective, or I have tons of ideas, but I need the platform to be online first in order to do that. So yeah, sometimes it's frustrating.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and working on your own is kind of a, how do you say that? The name, but anyway, yeah, I guess that like it's like other things you're doing on your own. At least you can control them in a way, but then obviously you can't. I'm a firm believer that you can't ever do anything fully on your own, and
No,
like
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, clearly not.
But yeah, that is so cool that you find people to help you and who are like, yeah, willing to jump on the project. That's really, really cool. But yeah, I can't imagine like just willing, like wanting for it to be out and in the world and then serve the purpose for what you imagined it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and just also because I think it can be useful for a few people at least. So just like
No,
I
definitely.
want it to be out there because I've been, collecting all this information, and if it can be useful, yeah.
Definitely. I literally cannot wait. I am so looking forward to it. Probably less than you because this is like your baby, but yeah, it's gonna be so cool. I was gonna ask about your challenges. I guess the development one was one. Was there anything else that you found challenging?
Just the fact that some people helped, which is always a good thing, and as I said, it's supposed to be collective and collaborative, but it's also a challenge when you have a new person that is really interested and is saying that he or she will be able to take this part in charge, but actually, because it's an unpaid project, like it's a side project for most of us, for all of us actually, except maybe for me because my baby. Then some people started to do things and then kind of abandoned,
Mm.
sometimes without notice, just they stopped working on the thing. And it can be a challenge, honestly. And also, every time you have to welcome a new person, you have to kind of not train them, but like inform them, because we want to be aligned in terms of vision and values. So that. And the second thing that I will mention very quickly, that it's really interesting to work with someone that has a different background, but it can also be challenging because, for instance, like Laura, she has a very technical background and a more like user experience point of view. And it happened that I was just focused on the content, and I want all the content to be at the same place. I don't really care if one reference is super long, or I don't really care if, I don't know, like things like that. Like I was
Mm.
really focused on, I want people to have access to as many resources and references and stuff like that. And sometimes we had difficulties to understand each other. And when I launched the social media, at first the idea was to launch the platform 3 weeks after, and the platform was not ready, still not ready. But I think I put a lot of pressure on her, because I wanted the project to get out, and I also started receiving messages, and I was invited to an event here in Montreal by a
Oh.
collective that is called Femme Experts, and they wanted to add me on their website and write an article about the project, but the article cannot be released because the project is not out.
Mm.
um, So, and even my female professor that at the university, they're like, oh, it's super interesting. Please, like, sure when it's ready. And so I think I took all this enthusiasm as a pressure, and I put it on Laura, and I shouldn't have, and we talked a lot about that because she was facing technical issues, but she had no ideas how to tackle them. So yeah, it just it's honestly like one of the most interesting thing to work with people that have different background and things differently. But sometimes you face problems, but it's also part of the journey. I mean, that's also why it's interesting.
Yeah, completely. Oh, that's so cool. But I'm glad also like being able to talk about it and everything. It's just the only thing you can do, I guess, and like learn and grow and do better the next time.
Exactly.
And was there anything on the contrary that was easier than you thought would be?
Just working on it, I've realized how passionate I am about these topics and how it's also helped me in my personal life, daily life. I think it kind of shaped me in a way because it's been 3 years, and yeah, it made me realize a ton of things. It changes a lot of my, not a lot, but some of my relationships also. So yeah, I think it's easy to work on this for me, because I'm passionate about these topics. I want to understand how it works. I want to understand the impacts, and I think it gave me so many keys. Like now, when for instance, I was talking about yesterday when I was talking with my professor, and she was telling me about having kids in academia. Now it's not only, oh my God, that's terrible. It's also that I have the keys to understand the mechanisms that are behind that. So yeah, I think in that way, um, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And honestly, I mean, again, not as a pressure, just as a enthusiasm. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. But you'll be among the first first persons to know for sure.
Yay! Cannot wait. And last but not least, my favorite question: why are you proud of of what you've done, of you in this project?
Well, honestly, I think that I'm really proud of the fact that I've persevered over the last 3 years, despite the difficulties. And actually, this project also made me realign kind of my life with my values, because then I've started the PhD, and I reoriented my thesis topic to be, really on social movements because that's what I care about. Then my side projects, my side research projects are also about things that I'm deeply passionate, interested about, and I think are important. So yeah, I think I'm just proud of that, and of the fact that it has been a collective journey, and that I think it's the most important things to me.
That's amazing. I love that. And we're gonna conclude our episode on this. Thank you so much for coming and sharing all of this. Yeah,
Thank
really
you.
remarkable and cannot wait. Yeah, to see it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Before we finish, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you really wanted to talk about during our discussion?
No, I think I talked too much.
No, not too much. I think it was perfect. Like every bit of it was interesting. So again, thank you so
You're
much.
welcome. But thank you for your work, actually. Thank you for your podcast, and I think it's a great idea.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot. Thank you so much. Well, and there's a tradition in this podcast that the guest always gets the very last word, so the mic is yours.
Women.